and welcome to the debut episode of the KensaGroup podcast. KensaGroup is a technology commercialization company which works with other companies in their early stages or other critical stages of their lives. And right now we're partnering with Prendismo, which you can check out on prendismo.com. I'm Jason Weinstein, joined by Eric Heisenhut, a managing director at KensaGroup. And today we're talking about after the cap and gown. Pretty timely right now, graduation season really getting upon us. And so when you're ready to get that diploma, what exactly do you do? I think for most of us, we just try to get a job, but maybe it's not just that simple anymore, Eric.
Yeah, the decision of, where do you go after school and what are the roles, what are the things that you do while in school to position you for that next step are critical. And clearly, one of the goals of continuing your education in college and is to look at can you get a job? What industry do you want to be in? And what are the things that you can do as you make that step out of college into the workforce? Because there's a broad array of opportunities that are out there.
Well, today we're going to talk about different ways to get that first job, and we're going to hear from a lot of experts thanks to Prendismo.com, which is a platform to deliver the insights of over 900 speakers in the form of 17,000 videos about leadership and management. Much of it's based out of Cornell University. And we're going to start with the idea of working at a large company as a means to maturing and learning certain skills. I know for you, you cut your teeth and you let somebody else kind of train you before you went off on your own. And it seems to have worked out well for you.
Yeah. So for me, the decision coming out of school with an engineering degree in 1989, I made the decision, had the opportunity to go work at IBM, and it was a very, obviously a large company. It was at the time when IBM was still making PCs. They had an operating system competing with Microsoft, so it was a very different time. But it was as a large company, it afforded a lot of training and infrastructure around me to really open my eyes to industries that I did not know existed when I was going through the academic stage of the engineering degree.
And we've got a couple of Prendismo speakers lined up for you, Elliott Garlock and Gerald Beecham. I have a couple different perspectives on that first job.
Yeah, Elliott took his first assignment in Procter & Gamble in a brand management role, and he'll share with us some thoughts of the what do you learn in a large corporation in terms of personal development, systems, working with others.
I learned how to work with a lot of different types of people. I learned a lot about myself. There was a lot of self-discovery. I matured a lot, and that's all great, and I'm really grateful for that experience from P&G, and I wouldn't turn it down ever again. If I could go back in time, I'd do the exact same thing. But it didn't actually teach me how to be an entrepreneur. But what it did do is it said, I definitely don't want to do that again. And sometimes knowing and viscerally knowing that there's something you don't want to do, sometimes you just have to do it to really know.
Gerald Beecham comes from a very different perspective. He comes from the perspective of finance and very well speaks to how do you, when you're making that step out of your education, how do you get that next level of training? Do you go out and do it on your own dime, your own nickel, or do you go out and work in a larger corporation that has some of those resources available to you? And he takes you through his experiences from J.P. Morgan Chase early on in a large banking atmosphere to becoming a managing partner in White Corner and Lane, an investment banking firm that he's a principal in.
If you're going to be Zuckerberg, then obviously that's a good trade, right? How many Zuckerbergs are there though, right? From my perspective, I kind of look at it as you got to get trained. Unless you're going to, I was not the person to come up with a Facebook or a Twitter. That just ain't me. For me, coming out and doing a startup didn't make any sense. For other folks, if that's in your DNA, then go do that. I personally believe you got to get trained somewhere. It's much cheaper to get trained on someone else's dime than it is on yours.
So that was Elliott Garlock and Gerald Beecham. And of course, when it comes to getting hired, the landscape is changing in many ways almost as quickly as technology and social media is changing, because the impact of social media is just huge when it comes to all aspects of employment and even life, social and otherwise, but especially getting that first job. It can be just an immense tool for you.
Yeah, and it's something that we did not have to deal with, coming out of school in the late 80s and 90s, even probably for those coming out in the early 2000s. Social media has changed so much, and I think it's important that when you're ready to look for that job, or even when you're not looking for a job, but just to be aware that that social media presence, whatever your footprint may be, will be part of the hiring process. So Keith Hannon, an associate director at Cornell University, does a really nice job of explaining what surveys they've conducted at a university level to understand how are employers using social media in their hiring practice.
Drinking, drug use, inappropriate photos, poor communication skills. I came from what's supposed to be a good communication school, maybe not. Bad mouth employer-employee, lies about qualifications, discriminatory remarks. Now all of these things, this research isn't asking them about social media. These are just things that they have not hired people based on in general. But if you think about that list, those are all things that present themselves very readily within social media, and people are starting to look for those things. So when asked, have you ever rejected a candidate because of what you saw about them on social networking site? Almost 70% of companies said yes. 26% no, but the important thing is only 5% actually aren't looking. So 95% of companies are looking.
You yourself, Eric, use social media when it comes to the hiring process.
We do. We use social media extensively when we're going through the verification process. Certainly there's no substitute for references, and we make the phone calls and talk to former employers and people that have been close to the people we're considering to hire for pretty much all levels of positions within our companies. But first thing we do, we're searching on Facebook, we're looking on Instagram, we're looking on Twitter, and we are going to get a very quick snapshot of what messages people are posting on topics that are very much not related to work. You know, we're not expecting a lot of scientific discoveries to be occurring on Facebook, but what we are learning about is how do they treat their peers, how do they treat others around them, and that social dynamic, the soft skills that we want people to come in with, are very much reflected in social media. So it's absolutely a part of our hiring process, and very, very quick decisions can be made from what we see.
Well, it's one thing to prepare yourself as a candidate for a job. It's another to really discover what job, what industry it is you want to get into. And there's a lot of data out there to help you discover, A, what you might be interested in, and B, if your interests align with an industry that might be emerging.
Yeah, and industries are changing so quickly. Certainly there are mature industries that are the tried and true, and they're not going anywhere. They will be there, but they'll change. And I think one of the things that we all need to do is look at what data is out there. And Alexandra Levitt, who is a career columnist for a columnist on careers for the Wall Street Journal, speaks about the amount of data that is available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
www.bls.gov/OOH. I swear the Bureau of Labor Statistics they must employ 24 people whose sole job it is to investigate international professions and find out what is it like to work in this profession on a daily basis. Is it going up or going down? How many people are working in it? What is the skill set required? What is the education required? What are people saying about it? How is it being covered in the media? Anything you could possibly want to know about this profession, it's got on there.
You know, one example I would highlight is data analytics, big data analysis. If you have an interest in math and get excited about data and the role that it can play, that opportunities are enormous. When you look at the amount of data that's being assembled by the Googles of the world, the Yahoos, and others, that is being translated into meaningful actions by companies. And the people that are really contributing extensively to that are the math geeks. They're making a real mark for themselves in that big data analytics world.
Whether you're successful in getting your first job or you're still kind of looking, there might be that question that gets into a lot of people's minds. Should I go to grad school? Should I not? When should I go? And I know we've got two different perspectives lined up for you, Jennifer Delsky and Rob Fried, who's a film producer, worked on Rudy. Again, the question can be a different answer for a lot of people.
Yeah, and Rob gets to a bit of a contrarian view. Many would say that it's important to work in industry and then go back to grad school. He looked at it quite differently, where he felt that academic preparation stage was something that he wanted to keep a continuum on and maintain that. And some of it is knowing who you are.
There was a certain inherent logic to the idea that you would complete the academic phase of your life in one shot before you began the professional phase of your life, rather than kill the momentum and return back to school. Now, I can understand why, if you were endeavoring to have a certain type of career, why it would make sense to perhaps work in a Wall Street firm or a consulting firm or an advertising agency for a couple of years and then return. But I knew young that I was going to do something entrepreneurial and something different. So I thought that the chances were high that if I went into the workforce, I wouldn't return to school.
I guess the thing I would kind of add to the mix is, do you even go to grad school? My path to business was engineering, to work in a large corporation in the semiconductor field and do real engineering, as I would describe it. But then I knew pretty early on that I wanted to have an appreciation of the business side and the sales side of technology. So for me, I migrated within a larger corporation to get some of that exposure, and then made some career decisions to take me out of large firms and into small firms, where I learned a lot of business without going to grad school. But when we look at the insights of Jennifer Dulski, she felt that her psychology background and what she was doing in the non-for-profit world, and the role that the emerging internet economy was going to play in the world, were such that she felt she needed grad school.
In the early 90s, and I actually had internet access because I worked in a school and didn't really understand what it was or how to use it. And she said, these two guys at Stanford have started this company, this website that helps you navigate other websites, and she wrote it for me on a post-it note, www.yahoo.com, and stuck it to my computer. And I thought, this is amazing. And I just knew that I wanted to be involved. And so when I was at business school, I actually came back west and said I got my MBA internship at Yahoo. I was one of the first 2 MBA interns there because they didn't have a program. It was only a couple hundred-person company at the time. And so it was partially that I wanted the skills that made me go get an MBA, but it was partially because I knew I might want to change careers also.
So let's say you're in your first job and having some success. You're climbing that ladder. But that idea of going back to grad school, whether it's to enhance your skills or give you a new set of skills, that opportunity is still out there. And I know Janov Greinstein, somebody else we will hear from the Prendismo Library, he had a pretty successful answer to that question as to whether or not he should go to grad school.
Yeah, and I think in his particular case, as a mechanical engineer living in Israel, great schools, strong professional decisions, 5 years into it, but feeling that there was something missing.
It took me a while to figure out that engineering was not exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. During the time I was working, I took evening MBA courses, and I was really interested and intrigued with business. After a couple of years of studying, I realized that this was the area that interested me the most, and in particular finance within business. And the reason it was interesting is that it really put together math and logic along with human behavior.
So far in this episode of After the Cap and Gown, which in and of itself suggests some transition. You go from graduation to your next step. We've talked about the role of schooling in terms of taking that next step, grad school or no, how far you want to advance into your career before you start thinking about that. But now we're talking about maybe some life transitions and how that may play into where you want to go with your career. And there can be a certain excitement when it comes to entrepreneurship, but there are some trade-offs as well. If you're in a larger corporate environment, if you're having some success there, do you want to jump out on your own, or do you want to keep advancing?
Yeah, and I kind of have lived through that myself, where I came through the larger corporation, multi-billion-dollar semiconductor entities, and with that came a whole bunch of personal choices, sacrifices that we make knowingly. And looking to get a better handle on travel schedules and less international travel, entrepreneurship for me was a way to do that, and that was to create a smaller, earlier stage company. And I found that for me, a career change, my personal development and growth was occurring by making that transition from large corporation to a smaller entrepreneurial experience. Chris Wilkerson, he early on looked at, he kind of did some pretty reflective thinking of how he is wired and what gets him excited. And it is a reality of larger corporations. You may not have control over your rate of growth, how quickly you can contribute to the level that you believe you can. And so for Chris, he chose smaller corporations, early stage activities, and in a rapidly growing field of healthcare and the equipment and the leasing of equipment in the healthcare field. And that's where he describes just a compelling growth story for him.
I wasn't involved in a structured environment where they said, you will do this, you'll have a review every 6 months, you'll get promoted, this is how your salary will change. There wasn't a formalized training program. I did give up on that, and I also gave up on having a name brand on my resume, at least on the professional side. I had no problem giving up those two things, because what I got was an opportunity. It was a land grab. Being in a startup, and a startup that's growing, it's all there. And everyone is running at speeds they're barely able to keep up frequently. And if you see an opportunity, there's something there you want to do, and you're capable, you can do it.
No matter where you may be in the decision-making process of staying with a big company, going off on your own, it always helps to have help, a mentor. And we tend to, if you're successful, pick up mentors as we go along the way. But you may be interested in hearing what one of the biggest names in corporate America, global corporate world, has to say about mentors.
Yeah, Indra Nooyi is CEO of PepsiCo and just a dynamic speaker. To be a woman, an Indian woman running a corporation the size of PepsiCo, she really is an insightful person, and she speaks to the importance of mentorships. And having worked in large companies, I will absolutely echo the importance it is of your growth trajectory within large companies to have a mentor. But what she highlights is that yes, you can go out and look for mentors. Yes, you need to make yourself available, but ultimately that personal connection, a true mentor, is someone who will find you.
If you go to somebody and say, will you be my mentor? And if they say yes, they're really not your mentor. They're just there. Because mentors have to find you because there's something about you they think is worth mentoring. So in my experience, mentors have always found me. And unfortunately, in my life, all my mentors have been men. I haven't had a female mentor. Maybe it was a time in which I grew up. All my mentors have been men, and they've been phenomenal mentors. And everybody who's been my mentor from the time I was a kid is still in my life in some shape or form. And even if I've gone way past them, they still give me advice, and I still listen to them.
So you use mentors and all these other tools we've talked about today to have some success. Hopefully you have some success. But success can sometimes come at a price. So when your personal life starts to develop along with your professional life, there are these sets of choices you have to make when it comes to life balance.
Saba Berry is a very successful managing director at Merrill Lynch, and she describes how she tries to balance what the priorities of her day are, whether they be personal things at home with children or whether they be extra effort with clients.
I still make a lot of mistakes, but here's how I handle it. On any given day, I look at what is the priority that I need to focus on. Sometimes it's my home. Sometimes it's my son is in a play this evening. That means even if there was an important meeting at work, I'm at my son's play. He's 11 years old. He's going to remember if mom didn't turn up at the play, and I want to be there. There's sometimes it's work, okay, and the family gives. So what I've decided is something's always going to give. You better choose as to what that something is going to be, and don't have regrets about it.
Managing your time and how you allocate that will vary through the stages of your career, and I've lived it as well. When you travel extensively, it takes a toll on you physically, on your family. Yet it comes with phenomenal benefits for what you can appreciate of different cultures, of economic opportunity, and it's just a question of how do you balance that for yourself over time and for the people around you that you care about.
Today we've gone after the cap and gown, whether it's immediately after the cap and gown and trying to get that first job, whether or not you should incorporate a return to school and grad school into your career track, and really, if you go along your career track and achieve some success and how to balance that with your personal life, a lot to consider after the cap and gown as we are in the midst of graduation season, but hopefully you took something out of it, and there's plenty more to be had as well. If you go to prendismo.com, you can subscribe there. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and it's a way to be informed when you have these conversations about business and leadership and management. You also have a chance, Eric, to follow Prendismo on Twitter. Also follow yourself on Twitter and on Facebook as well.
Yeah. The importance of putting yourself out there, of talking to people, whether it's going for your 2-year degree, your bachelor's degree, the internship. There's just an enormous amount of opportunity that exists, not only for us in upstate New York where we're located, but this story, this challenge of economic opportunity and career development, it's across the country, it's around the world.
All right, for Eric Eisenhut, I'm Jason Weinstein, and this has been the KensaGroup Podcast. Thanks for joining us.